Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 616 with our review of Greyhound. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a streaming platform near you. This week in the feeds, you will have found a review of Palm Springs. We have this review of Greyhound, and we have a review of Relic and a review of First Cow. So lots of stuff coming at you. We don't have any, any naval-themed banter questions to start this episode off with. So we're just going to dive straight into this episode for the sake of time. So we're going to take a listen to the trailer for Greyhound, and then we're going to come back and give you a review.
Congratulations on your first command, at last.
I will always be looking for you, Evie. Even if I'm 1,000 miles away.
Air escort to Greyhound. You will now be out of range of air cover for the next 5 days. How many crossings does this make?
This is my first.
I got some.
Most likely a U-boat.
He's trying to slip under us! Fire!
We have a kill.
Distress rockets, sir.
We have hits directly on the convoy.
The wolfpacks hunting us.
U-boat, starboard bound!
We've lost 7 ships and 50 souls.
What you did yesterday got us to today.
It's not enough.
Fires, baby! Targets disappeared, sir.
Here they come.
What are we gonna do?
We'll rain hell down from on high.
All right, so that was the trailer for Greyhound. Essentially, back in World War II, America was sending a bunch of troops, cargo, and whatnot over across the ocean, across the Atlantic. And in this story, inexperienced captain is basically sent on his first journey to help protect a convoy going across the Atlantic over to the other side, and they're trying not to get sunk by German submarines. So, Stephen Miller, what did you think of Greyhound? Do you have another boom goes the dynamite here?
No, I don't. It probably would be easy to come up with one, actually. All
right.
I think this is another classic guy is good at his job type of Tom Hanks movie that is all about like luxuriating in the details of how someone accomplishes a task well. And I had fun with it, even though I still don't think I understand any details of how you do any of the stuff in this movie. It's an interesting thing. It's a very kind of like minimalistic movie, considering the fact that it looks at least like a pretty big budget, kind of solid war film. Like it does not overly glamorize anything. It doesn't have like long slow motion footage. This is not Saving Private Ryan. Like this is not a movie that is like, hoorah, look at how crazy war is. Like here's a major patriotic ode. This feels more like one of those dark kind of confined war movies that is like, here's one very specific thing. We are going to show it like we would to a history buff dad or something, and assume that that will be enough for the audience to just kind of like throw them into the thick of it and enjoy a few days worth of skirmishes. And it was enjoyable. It was enjoyable. I don't think it is great by any means. I think it is a like completely bare bones, stripped down movie that wants to do one thing very well, and it accomplishes it. Like, I think if you were curious what it would be like to be on a big destroyer ship, that's what I'm going to call them. I don't know Navy words at all. I think this tells you what it would be like. Like, this tells you how the protocols are. It tells you how quickly things can change, how old equipment that is not... Like, there are problems that could only have existed back then, because now with technology, the idea of locating a thing is so easy. Like, the risk would be very different. And so you're brought back into this old school era of like analog equipment that can freeze because it's way too cold out there, trying to track U-boats that are like floating beneath you, and you just have sonar and math and your best bet and barely enough fuel or ammunition to get by. And yeah, I liked it. I was into it. I don't think it is very grand. I don't think it reaches that high. I don't feel like I know this captain at all at the end. Like, there isn't much characterization. It's just the little things. Like, there's a tiny tear in his eye at one point in this movie. He's frequently asking for like slippers or a coat or little like niceties, and that it adds just enough for me to be on board and enjoy the history for what it is. But this isn't a movie that I would like rush out to see either. I think it's just totally solidly fine, and it has enough Tom Hanks for me to be happy with it.
Yeah, good thing it's free for anybody who owns an iPhone. that was made in the last year. So this film was originally coming to theaters. Obviously, COVID put the kibosh on that, so that's not happening anymore. But this, I feel like this would be a good thing to see in in an XD screening or something, where you just really get like the heft of the cannons being fired and the depth charges going off. If I can back up for a second, I'm going to tell a little side story, which is just a fun little anecdote. It's really just fun for me. But when I was young,
that's the whole podcast, Chris.
yeah, true. Touche, Stephen. But yeah, so a long time ago, back in the day, my dad had a computer when I was very young, but it was like business computer. You're not supposed to use it for anything but like spreadsheets and balancing budgets and junk like that. And he did have a few games though. And one of the games he did have was a game which I could be getting this wrong, but I believe it was called Silent Steel. And it was a like video that you watched. It was like a choose your own adventure submarine video game where you're basically watching a movie and then you make your decisions as the captain of the ship. And I have never made it past the first encounter with an enemy submarine. So this film was a fun exercise in seeing how scary it is to go up against enemy submarines. All right, end of little side story. But yeah, so the reason I asked you if you had another Boom Goes the Dynamite setup is because I feel like this film is, for very many reasons, an extremely good pair with the film Fury, which is another film that is about people going up against very, very good killing German war vessels, right? And I think that what this film does great and makes me really, really enjoy that aspect of the film is it really... It's not, this is not Battleship, right? Where like aliens are going off and things are shooting in the sky and like you see all that kind of stuff. This shows how ridiculous naval combat is. Like there's no reason why the subs shouldn't just sink every single thing in the ocean, right? Because they're semi-protected, they're underwater. And like this, just like there are scenes when the target is right there and you see it, but your guns can't hit it because those guns aren't meant to attack that thing at the angle that, like, there was very, very interesting things. And it just watching this film, I couldn't help but think of the evolution of just sea travel in general, right? Like you had people building small boats, and then you had really, really big boats. And as soon as you had boats that different people owned, they might try to attack each other. So you build like projectiles that could I assume the first thing was you pull up your ship along the enemy's ship and then you just jump on it and then start fighting, right? And then eventually you had like cannons. And then every evolution in the type of thing, you have to adapt the thing that you have to be able to fight that thing. And there's so many aspects of the destroyers or whatever there are that are not meant for fighting everything. They're meant for fighting one specific thing in one specific scenario. And if you have to spend all your energy getting your ship into that scenario so that you can attack it. Like if this was a massively multiplayer online game, right, where you were ships and submarines, there's no way I would just see a flare go up and be like, I'm going to charge into the middle of open sea and just try to find this thing that I know is somewhere out there. So there is this, what this film does great is it shows you the mechanics of war between submarines and battleships. And that was incredibly entertaining to me. And I really got invested in watching the process of, how, I mean, even though I will say it seemed like the submarine was always at like 087. I don't know why every time they were attacking the ship, it always came from that degree.
What's the deal with submarines always being at 087?
But I really enjoyed this film for that aspect of it. As you said, this is beyond a reduced story. This is literally, it's like a 24-hour period of time, or maybe it's 48 hours. It's something
like 48,
very,
maybe.
Yeah, it's something very, very simple. And it's literally just, hey, that plane right there, it's not going to be able to protect us anymore. We got to survive for a while. And then however many of them make it, and then the movie's over, right? And I think that the film isn't telling a interesting story about a person. It's telling a compelling narrative about how scary it would be just to bring supplies across the ocean when you know that anywhere out there under the water, there is some scary ship ready to just sink you. So yeah, I think it's an incredible look at naval combat and a story that I could care less about.
Yep. I hear that. And it does care about the details. Like I keep thinking of this as a dad movie, and it helps that like Tom Hanks wrote the screenplay for this movie. And I feel like he was just like, damn, I've been reading all these World War II books. I want to make one into a movie. And if I star in it, it's going to get made for sure. And it works. Yeah. Like I like the logistics too.
I like the idea of him going into a pitch movie and he's like, hey, so I wrote the screenplay. What do you think about this, Apple? Big old war at sea. And they're like, that seems like it could be interesting. He's like, what if I could get Tom Hanks to do it?
Yeah, it's funny because the monologue you gave about like the complications of naval travel and naval battle, I swear we've had that conversation in other episodes of the podcast, like probably the 300 sequel, or maybe if we reviewed Master and Commander, but that was probably before our time on the pod.
I think that was before our time.
I don't know, like it is true, and I was thinking of it too, of just how so many of these limitations, it's kind of like First Man, right? Where you look at it and you're like, it is crazy that we did anything. If you had just waited a little longer, the science could have caught up to what you wanted it to do. But of course, the whole point of war is you are like at the forefront of whatever is possible because the enemy is also going to have whatever you have. Like crossing the Atlantic, there's this gap that they can't make because planes can only really get like one way. So if you need to be able to safely turn around and go back and have some leftover fuel to do other things, like you can't do it, right? Lindbergh had only made his flight a little bit before this movie. And if they just waited like a decade or something,
there would be aircraft carriers.
Yeah, it'd be no big deal. Yeah, exactly. Like you would have aircraft carriers alongside you, and that would solve. I think even in World War II they had them, but I guess they were still like rare enough that they couldn't just use them. But so many of these things are just about like very specific technical limitations and how you work around them. I did think about Fury. in thing of comparisons. I also, the Imitation Game is something that came up in my head because sending encrypted messages was a big deal. And that is another thing where they're just like racing to beat the other person in this like very archaic, it's a science that will not last long because the world is going to change constantly. And all you have to do is be better than your opponent for a little bit of time. I found that totally entertaining too. It was just the threadbare nature of everything in this movie just made it kind of like, I watched it, I liked it, and then it like flittered out of my brain like immediately after I watched it. But it does have little good Hanks moments. Like there is a character whose last name is Cleveland in this movie that we get to see just enough about him to have like a tiny little emotional arc in this movie. I like Hanks's grizzled, like, I'm just doing the job. That's all I'm here for. I'm just going to stay awake, stay alert, try to do the best I can. Like, it's fine. It's a good Tom Hanks vehicle. I'm on board. I am sure this is a better Battleship movie than Battleship was.
Yeah. I think that, you know, it still brings me back to like wanting to make video game analogies with it. Because I feel like, you know, I play a lot of Destiny 2, I play a lot of shooting games. I'm not the best at all these games. I generally spec a weapon that has a large magazine and can fire a lot of bullets, because eventually I'll get pretty good with some of those bullets, but a lot of them are going to miss too. And I'm so used to playing games where you just unload hell on the enemy, and then there's just unlimited ammo anywhere. And if you're out of ammo, you're probably going to get killed any second. When you respawn, you'll be full of ammo again for your next round playing. But like, this really shows that like, there's just a submarine under the water somewhere, so I'm just going to dump like 10 depth charges. You're like, well, how many depth charges do you have? I don't know, like 15? It's crazy to me that anybody ever survived. It's very, very interesting. Like, and honestly, I think the only reason that anybody really ever survived making it across the Atlantic is because apparently U-boats could only fire torpedoes from just below the surface. It wasn't something that you could be like deep underwater and fire up at a ship, because if you could do that, it would just like, there's nothing anybody could ever do to you because the depth charge is going to reach that low, right? It just seems crazy that like everything is about overcoming the limitations of the other person that you're fighting. And it's not really about you having a particularly interesting vehicle. It's just how do you barely skirt by what the enemy is having to do? It just blows my mind.
So in our Ford v Ferrari episode, which we were reminded of recently, we played a game of like, we both don't know anything about cars. Let's try to talk about cars. I don't know anything about naval warfare. So I'm just going to ask, did we have submarines also? Or did only Germany have them? Because I feel like a submarine would be way better at hunting another submarine than a like giant boat on the surface that just has to like wait to be attacked.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know the answer to that question. If you would have asked me beforehand, I maybe would have done a little Googling. I was too busy trying to Google what the turning radius of a World War II naval ship was, because they sure seem to turn very, very fast in this film.
Yeah, or just fast enough every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's also just how much you miss and how easy it is. Again, the fact that it is all about the limitations and knowing the limitations of your enemy. Like, there are decoys in this movie, things that trick the sensors, and they are not like giant fake submarines. They are just things that happen to register the same on the specific equipment that they're using, right? Like, so much of it is this game of chess between two people who are just like racing to have slightly better equipment and better methods for finding each other. And I do think like all movies, at least not all movies, all war movies, or at least all good war movies, hint a little bit at the futility of war, or the fact that it is all cyclical, right? Forever, for whatever little grand thing that happened in this moment, there are going to be like thousands and thousands of others that are meaningless. And this does have little bookends that kind of hint at that, of like, whatever we've just gone through, this is just one of thousands of like-minded things that are going to happen, and you're going to get numb to it eventually. And I did kind of think that was a nice little, like a nice little thing to keep in mind in this movie of like, I don't even think this is dramatizing it as much as most war movies, but it still has that kind of zoom out moment at the end of like, yeah, this whole thing was fucked. And I like that.
Well, so you mentioned the decoys and stuff that are talked about in this film. One of the things I couldn't help but think about in this film is, like, we do find out about a decoy, and the whole point of that decoy is to make sounds that sonar would pick up, and you would get the acoustic resonance that sounded like maybe a propeller spinning and a person making a move in a certain direction, and then you might follow them or try to bomb that thing, and not know that it wasn't actually a ship or whatever. But one of the things I learned in this film is that one of the only ways you know you've blown up a submarine is you look for all the oil and shit and debris to come up to the surface. Like, why would you not just have like a cargo bay full of oil and shit? And then if somebody's like dropping depth charges on you, you like release that up into the water and they go like, cool, we got them. Let's move on and get somebody else. And then you just like sink them.
That's a good call, yeah. Or a decoy that makes the sound of an exploding ship.
Yeah, but like at one point they think they got it and they're out looking for oil. So I think that if you get the sound of an exploding ship, then I don't think it does the same thing. Also, it might just be an effect that's in movies, but it always seems like when a ship that is underwater explodes, it like implodes on itself and then it explodes upwards in like a larger blast. That's not just an explosion. It seems like it has to do with the water being undisplaced by the submarine. Yeah. So I feel like you see like a good like that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was definitely cool. Did you want to eat ham and eggs after watching this movie?
I wanted every time his like breakfast or whatever got brought to him and he's like, shit, we got to go try to rescue another ship. I was like, I'll eat that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I was just hungry while I was watching it, but especially because they do convey how cold and isolating it is on that boat. And like, when you're feeling that way, like you either want a plate of ham and eggs or you want maybe a biscuit with some honey and a little bit of cinnamon grated on top.
Is that foreshadowing to a later review?
Yeah, it's foreshadowing.
Get your oily cakes.
Ooh.
Those did look damn good.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, we're not quite ready to talk about oily cakes. Just oil slicks on the top of the ocean after destroying a U-boat. But yeah, do you have any last thoughts about this film, Stephen?
No. No. Fine movie. I guess one last thing is that I'm forgetting the name of the movie I want to compare it to. What was the Joseph Gordon-Levitt movie we just reviewed a couple episodes ago?
7500.
Yeah. I did get a little bit of 7500 vibes too here, in that it seemed to be just interested in the mechanics of what the equivalent of a cockpit is. Yeah. And how it would feel to go through an emergency without an ability to really go anywhere or do anything. So I thought those kind of paired nicely together. Dude,
that freaking when you're in front of the bridge and you're outside and you're on the front, there's that thing where you lift up the tube and you scream into a pipe to talk to the people back in the bridge. That blew my mind. That's even like a thing. It's just like when you're outside the ship, that's how you talk to the people inside the ship.
Yeah. It does really also get to how failure prone all of this was, right? Like, he says a thing and another guy repeats it and shouts it, so another guy can phone it to a person who is hearing a staticky version of it and then reading a staticky instrument and reading back numbers to them. Like, computers really helped the world a lot when they find. Yeah, and by helped, I mean made it easier for us to kill each other.
Well, depending on who you talk to, that's helping, I guess. Okay, well, on that note, what do you say, Steve, when we get to our verdicts for Greyhound?
Sure.
All right, if you're going to give this a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I'm giving this a totally happy wait for rental. I don't think this movie is doing anything all that special. It is very bare bones, and it isn't even a bare bones character study. It is just like a bare bones study of the mechanics of naval warfare around World War II. But it was fun. It was fine. Like, I think you'll have a good time. If you think you'll want to watch it, you will probably like it. I don't think it lasts very long, and I don't think it really is doing anything particularly interesting beyond, a little History Channel episode. So I liked it just fine. It just didn't have very much staying power. But Tom Hanks is always good.
Yeah. I enjoyed this film for like the mechanics aspect of understanding how naval combat works, and I really, really enjoyed that. But as we've said already, there isn't a lot going with the overall presentation of what it's doing. It's just like, whoa, how insane is it to have to fight a naval battle? So while I like that, I'm also going to give it a wait for rental. But yeah, I think, maybe if you're going to do a double feature with this and Fury, then maybe that bumps it up a little bit, just so you can have that like, oh shit, tank fighting is really crazy. Oh shit, naval fighting is really crazy. And then you can just like be like, thank God I don't have to do any of this.
Tanks, but no tanks.
Did you say that in the Fury episode?
Yeah, I said that in the Fury episode, however many years ago that was.
All right. Well, I believe that's going to bring us to the end of our review of Greyhound. So, Stephen, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller and sdavidmiller.com. And you boat, I'm not going to boat.
All right. People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so in Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/spoilerwarning, Facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or Instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from the soundtrack to Greyhound, so hopefully you're enjoying that. And we got 2 more reviews still to do for you, so we're going to head off and do that, and hopefully not get sunk by any torpedoes in the meantime. So talk to you later. Bye.